am Tessa, 21 years old, and I still remember the gut-wrenching moment I discovered my dad and stepmom had spent thousands of dollars sending her kids to college and on a European vacation while forcing me to work 3 jobs to pay my own tuition. That betrayal cut deep, but it was nothing compared to the family secret I accidentally uncovered that would change everything forever. Before I tell you how I discovered the truth that turned my whole world upside down, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family. Growing up, I always thought I had a normal family. My parents divorced when I was 12, which was difficult but not unusual. Many of my friends had parents who were separated or remarried. What made my situation different was that my mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer just a year after the divorce. The next 3 years were a blur of hospital visits, hope, disappointment, and finally, devastating loss. I was only 15 when she passed away. During those painful years, my dad was my rock. Even though he and my mom weren't together anymore, he stepped up in ways I never expected. He would drive me to the hospital after school, sitting with us during chemotherapy sessions and making sure I always had what I needed at home. On weekends, he would take me fishing at Lake Michigan, just the 2 of us in his old boat talking about everything and nothing as the sun sparkled on the water. "Your mom would be so proud of how strong you are," he would tell me, his voice cracking slightly as he baited my hook. "And I want you to know that I'll always be here for you, kiddo. Always." I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was the one who hung my academic achievement certificates on the refrigerator. He attended every school event, sitting front row at my debate competitions. When I expressed interest in psychology during my sophomore year, he bought me books on the subject and encouraged my dream of going to college. "Education is the one thing no one can ever take away from you," he would say. "Your mom and I always wanted to make sure you had the chance to go to any college you wanted." Our Thanksgiving traditions were simple but special. We would make my mom's famous apple pie together, following her handwritten recipe card that was worn at the edges from years of use. Dad would always tell stories about Mom while we cooked, keeping her memory alive in our home. Everything changed when Dad met Stephanie. I was 16 and he had been single for nearly 4 years. At first, I was happy for him. He deserved to find someone who made him smile again. Stephanie worked in real estate, was 38 years old, and had 2 children from her previous marriage, Aiden, who was 17, and Mia, who was 15. The first few times I met Stephanie, she seemed nice enough. She would bring little gifts for me, ask about school, and seemed genuinely interested in my life. But looking back, I realize there was always something performative about her kindness, like she was playing a role until she secured her position in our lives. Dad and Stephanie dated for only 8 months before he proposed. The wedding was small, just close family and friends. I wore a blue dress that my mom had helped me pick out for a school dance years before. It barely fit anymore, but wearing it made me feel like she was still part of this day. I remember catching Dad looking at me during the ceremony, his eyes filled with tears, and I wondered if he was thinking about her too. Everything moved quickly after that. Stephanie and her kids moved into our home, and suddenly, our quiet house was filled with noise, new furniture, and unfamiliar routines. The changes were subtle at first. Dad started spending more time with Aiden, teaching him to drive in the same patient way he had taught me. Family dinners became centered around Mia's competitive dance schedule. My debate tournaments were often missed because they conflicted with Aiden's basketball games. I told myself this was normal. Dad was trying to build relationships with his new stepchildren, and I shouldn't be jealous. But then I started noticing more concerning patterns. When Stephanie decided the kids' rooms needed redecorating, Aiden and Mia got complete makeovers with new furniture, while my room remained untouched. "Your room is already nice," Dad said when I asked about it, though my furniture had been the same since I was 10. When Aiden turned 18, Dad and Stephanie surprised him with a used but newer model car. It wasn't extravagant, but it was certainly nicer than the ancient Honda I had been driving since I got my license, a hand-me-down from my mom that constantly needed repairs. "We got a great deal on it," Dad explained when I later asked him privately why Aiden needed a new car when I had been driving a car that broke down at least once a month. "Besides, you already have a car that works fine." The car did not in fact work fine, but I swallowed my disappointment and tried to be understanding. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being entitled. Throughout all of this, my friend Jamie was my saving grace. We had been friends since middle school, and she knew what my family was like before and after Stephanie. Jamie would listen to me vent without judgment, offering her home as a safe space when things got too tense at mine. "I don't want to sound dramatic," I told Jamie one night as we sat on her bedroom floor surrounded by textbooks. "But sometimes I feel like I don't even recognize my dad anymore. It's like he's slowly becoming a different person." "That's not dramatic," Jamie replied, her expression serious. "Your feelings are valid, Tessa. And from what you've told me, something doesn't seem right about how they're treating you versus her kids." I appreciated her support, but I still tried to give my dad the benefit of the doubt. After all, he had been there for me during the worst time of my life. Surely he wouldn't deliberately hurt me now. Little did I know that the subtle inequities I had noticed were just the beginning. The real betrayal was still to come, and it would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Senior year of high school was supposed to be exciting. It was the year of college applications, prom, graduation, and planning for the future. I had worked incredibly hard to maintain my 4.0 GPA while participating in debate club and volunteering at a local crisis hotline. My dream was to study psychology at the University of Michigan, following in my mother's footsteps, who had studied there before becoming a therapist. I still remember the day my acceptance letter arrived. It was a chilly March afternoon, and I had rushed home from school to check the mail. When I saw the large envelope with the University of Michigan logo, my heart nearly stopped. I tore it open right there on the front porch, my hands shaking as I pulled out the letter. "Dear Tessa, congratulations! We are pleased to offer you admission to the University of Michigan." I screamed with joy, clutching the letter to my chest as tears streamed down my face. This was everything I had worked for, everything my mom had wanted for me. I ran inside, eager to share the news with my family. Dad and Stephanie were in the kitchen preparing dinner with Aiden and Mia. They all looked up when I burst through the door waving my acceptance letter. I got into Michigan," I announced, my voice cracking with emotion. Dad smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's nice, honey. Congratulations." Stephanie nodded politely. "Good job." Their lukewarm reaction was like a bucket of cold water. I stood there, my excitement deflating rapidly as they returned to their conversation about Aiden's upcoming basketball tournament. Just 2 weeks earlier, when Aiden had received his acceptance to a state college with a much lower ranking, they had taken the family out to dinner to celebrate. There had been balloons, a cake, and endless proud declarations about his accomplishment. For my acceptance to my dream school, I didn't even get a hug. I retreated to my room, confused and hurt. Later that night, Dad knocked on my door and asked if we could talk. I hoped he had realized how dismissive they had been and wanted to apologize. Instead, he sat on the edge of my bed with a serious expression. "Tessa, I need to talk to you about college." He began, his voice unusually formal. "Stephanie and I have been looking at our finances, and things are tight right now. With Aiden going to college next year too, and Mia's dance competitions getting more expensive, we just don't have the money to help with your tuition." I stared at him in disbelief. "But you always said you were saving for my college. You and Mom both did." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "The divorce changed things, and your mom's medical bills took a lot of our savings. I'm sorry, but you'll need to apply for scholarships and loans. Maybe consider a less expensive school." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. University of Michigan had been my dream since I was a child. It was where my mother had gone. And now, just as I'd achieved that dream, my father was telling me to give it up. "What about Aiden's college?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you helping him?" "That's different," Dad replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "His school is less expensive, and he got a small scholarship for basketball." I wanted to argue more, but the set of his jaw told me the decision was final. That night, I cried myself to sleep clutching a photo of my mom and me at the University of Michigan campus when I was 10. We had visited during a college tour, and she had shown me her old dormitory, the library, where she studied, and the psychology building, where she discovered her passion. "Someday, if you want, this could be your school too," she had told me, her arm around my shoulders as we stood on the central campus diag. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more inconsistencies in their claims of financial hardship. Stephanie came home with shopping bags full of new clothes for Mia. Aiden received the latest gaming console for no special occasion. Dad and Stephanie discussed renovating their bathroom, looking at expensive fixture catalogs on the kitchen table. None of these things aligned with a family struggling financially, yet I was expected to figure out how to pay for college on my own. I applied for every scholarship I could find, but even with the few I received, there was still a significant gap. With no other options, I decided I would work as much as possible and take out loans for the rest. I started at a local coffee shop, working morning shifts before school. I applied for a position at the university library for when I started college. On weekends, I babysat for several families in our neighborhood. The schedule was grueling, but it was the only way I could afford to chase my dream. Through all of this, Jamie continued to be my rock. She would bring me coffee during my library shifts, help me study when I was too exhausted to focus, and remind me that this struggle would be worth it in the end. "I don't understand why your dad is doing this," she said one evening as we sat in her car outside the house where I had just finished babysitting. "Your mom would be so upset if she knew." "Maybe he really is struggling financially," I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. "Or maybe Stephanie has convinced him that her kids should be the priority now." Jamie shook her head, her expression troubled. "There's something not right about this, Tessa. Parents don't just abandon their child's future like this, especially not after everything you've been through." I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I knew she was right. The father who had promised to always be there for me, who had encouraged my dreams and praised my hard work, would never have left me to struggle alone. Something had changed him, and that something had a name: Stephanie. The strain between my father and me continued to grow as I started my freshman year at the University of Michigan. I was working myself to exhaustion between my 3 jobs and full-time classes, often surviving on just a few hours of sleep. Meanwhile, the inequity at home became increasingly difficult to ignore. Spring break of my freshman year was when things really came to a head. I had been looking forward to a week at home to rest and recharge. My work schedule had been brutal, and I was struggling to keep up with my coursework while maintaining my scholarships. I needed this break desperately. I arrived home on a Friday evening, dragging my laundry bag and backpack full of textbooks. As I unlocked the front door, I was struck by the silence. The house was completely empty. No cars in the driveway, no lights on, no note on the kitchen counter. Confused, I called my dad's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Stephanie, Aiden, and even Mia. Nothing. Finally, I texted Jamie, who came over to keep me company in the empty house. "This is beyond weird," Jamie said as we sat at the kitchen table. "They knew you were coming home today, right?" "Yeah, I told Dad last week," I replied, scrolling through my phone to double-check our conversation. I had definitely told him my arrival time, and he had replied with a thumbs-up emoji. It wasn't until Sunday evening that I heard the sound of cars pulling into the driveway. I went to the front window and saw my family unloading luggage from their vehicles, laughing and talking animatedly. They looked tanned and relaxed. When they came through the door and saw me standing in the living room, they froze. Dad had the decency to look embarrassed, but Stephanie quickly recovered. "Tessa, we didn't expect you until tomorrow," she said, setting down her designer beach bag. "I told Dad I was coming on Friday," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. "Where were you all?" Dad cleared his throat. "We went to Florida for a few days. Stephanie's parents have a condo in Naples." "A family vacation?" Mia added cheerfully, not noticing or not caring about the tension. "The beach was amazing." "A family vacation." I repeated slowly, the words feeling like acid on my tongue. "That I wasn't invited to." "We thought you'd be busy with schoolwork," Dad said, not meeting my eyes. "And you know money's tight right now. We couldn't afford another plane ticket." I stared at him in disbelief. "You couldn't afford a text message to let me know you wouldn't be here when I arrived. You couldn't afford to include your daughter in family plans." "Tessa," Stephanie interjected, her tone condescending. "You're an adult now. We assumed you'd understand that sometimes plans have to be made quickly and not everyone can be included." I looked at my father, waiting for him to defend me, to say something that would make this situation less painful. But he just stood there silent and uncomfortable as his wife effectively told me I wasn't part of the family anymore. "I see," I said finally, my voice cold. "Well, I hope you all had a wonderful time." I turned and walked back to my room, closing the door quietly behind me. I wanted to slam it, to scream, to make them understand how much they had hurt me, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. The next morning, I discovered more evidence of their duplicity. While looking for a stapler in the home office, I noticed a shopping bag hidden behind the desk. Inside was a brand new MacBook Pro still in its box with a gift tag that read, "To Mia, love Dad and Mom." The sight of it made my blood boil. Mia already had a perfectly good laptop while I was struggling with a 6-year-old computer that crashed constantly. I had asked for help buying a new one for college, explaining that I needed it for research papers and presentations, but Dad had said they couldn't afford it. That same afternoon, I overheard a conversation that would change everything. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when I heard my dad and Stephanie talking in the adjacent dining room. I froze when I heard Aiden's name. "The study abroad program in Europe will cost about $20,000, my dad was saying. "But I think we can manage it. It's a great opportunity for him." "Absolutely," Stephanie agreed. "And with the money we've been setting aside, he can have some extra spending cash for weekend trips. I hear Barcelona is just a short flight from where he'll be studying in Paris." I stood there, the glass of water forgotten in my hand. $20,000 for a semester abroad, for Aiden, while I was working 3 jobs and taking out loans just to cover basic tuition. When I confronted my father later that evening, his response was dismissive. "Tessa, you need to understand that we have 3 children to support now," he said, rubbing his temples as if I was giving him a headache. "Aiden has worked hard for this opportunity." "And I haven't," I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I worked my entire high school career for the opportunity to go to Michigan, and you told me you couldn't help me at all. But you have $20,000 for Aiden to go to Europe." "It's different," he insisted, growing visibly uncomfortable. How is it different?" He couldn't answer that question. Instead, he muttered something about respecting his decisions and walked away, effectively ending the conversation. That night, I called Jamie in tears, explaining everything I had discovered. "Tessa," she said, after listening to my story. "I don't want to say this, but it needs to be said. This isn't just unfair. It's cruel. And I think there's more going on here than they're telling you." "What do you mean?" I asked, wiping away tears. "I don't know exactly," Jamie replied thoughtfully. But my mom mentioned something once about your mom's family having money. Did your grandparents leave anything for you when they passed away? The question struck me like lightning. My maternal grandparents had died when I was very young, but I did remember my mom mentioning that they had set something aside for my education. I had never thought about it again after she passed, assuming that if there was anything my dad would have told me. Now I wasn't so sure. The seed of doubt that Jamie had planted grew rapidly. If my grandparents had left money for my education, where was it, and why hadn't my father mentioned it? I needed answers, but I knew my father wouldn't provide them willingly. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The day before I was due to return to college, everyone left the house for various activities. Dad and Stephanie went to a dinner with her colleagues, Aiden had basketball practice, and Mia was at a friend's house. I had the house to myself for at least 4 hours. My heart pounded as I entered my father's home office. I felt like an intruder, even though this had been my home for most of my life. I told myself I was just looking for information about my insurance coverage for the upcoming semester. A plausible excuse if anyone caught me. I started with the filing cabinet, methodically going through folders labeled with various financial and household categories. Nothing unusual stood out, though I did notice that Aiden and Mia each had their own folders with detailed records of their expenses and activities. My folder was thin by comparison. Next, I moved to the desk drawers, carefully maintaining the order of everything I touched. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old tax returns, I found a small metal lockbox. It wasn't actually locked, which seemed strange for something hidden so deliberately. Inside were several manila envelopes, each labeled in my father's handwriting. One caught my eye immediately: Tessa Education Trust from Margaret Wilson. Margaret Wilson was my maternal grandmother. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and pulled out the contents. What I found made my blood run cold. There were legal documents detailing an educational trust fund established by my grandmother before her death. According to these papers, she had left me over $150,000 specifically for my college education. The trust had been managed by my mother until her death, at which point my father had become the trustee. The trust stipulated that the money was to be used exclusively for my educational expenses, tuition, books, housing, and other costs directly related to my schooling. Any remaining funds would be transferred to me when I turned 25 or completed my education, whichever came first. I sat there in shock, trying to process what I was seeing. My father had access to $150,000 for my education, yet he had told me they couldn't afford to help me at all. I had been working multiple jobs, taking out loans, exhausting myself physically and mentally, all while this money was sitting in an account somewhere. But where was the money now? I dug deeper into the box and found bank statements. As I reviewed them, a sickening pattern emerged. Over the past 3 years, since shortly after my father married Stephanie, there had been regular withdrawals from the trust fund. Large sums had been taken out around the time Aiden got his new car, when they renovated parts of the house, and most recently, a substantial withdrawal that coincided with their Florida vacation. My father had been systematically draining my education fund to support his new family. As I continued searching, I found email printouts between my father and a lawyer. The emails discussed reallocation of trust assets and legal interpretations of educational expenses. In one particularly damning exchange, my father had asked if there was a way to use the trust funds more flexibly without having to inform me. The lawyer's response was clear. The trust is explicitly for Tessa's education. Using it for other purposes could be considered a breach of fiduciary duty. My father had replied, "She doesn't need to know about the trust yet. We'll figure something out." I felt physically ill. This was beyond unfair treatment or favoritism. This was theft. My father had stolen money that was legally mine, money that my grandmother had specifically set aside for my education, and used it to fund a comfortable lifestyle for his new wife and stepchildren. With hands shaking so badly I could barely operate my phone, I called Jamie. "I need you to come over right now," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And bring your phone. I need to take pictures of some documents. Jamie arrived within 15 minutes. Her expression changed from concern to outrage as I showed her what I had found. "This is illegal, Tessa," she said as she helped me photograph every document. "He can't do this. This money is yours." "I don't even know what to do with this information," I admitted, overwhelmed by the betrayal. "You need legal advice," Jamie said firmly. "My uncle is a lawyer. I'll call him tomorrow." We carefully returned everything to its original place. As we closed the office door behind us, I felt like I was closing a chapter of my life. The father I thought I knew, the man who had promised to always be there for me, was gone. In his place was someone I no longer recognized or trusted. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of discovery pressing down on me like a physical force. I cycled through emotions: shock, grief, rage, and finally, a cold, clear determination. I would not let this stand. I would not be the family doormat anymore. By morning, I had a plan. I would gather evidence, seek legal counsel, and confront my father. But first, I needed to ensure I had copies of everything. After everyone left for the day, Jamie returned with her uncle's advice document: "Everything, do not confront them yet, and consult with a trust attorney as soon as possible." We spent the day making copies of every relevant document we could find. In addition to the trust paperwork and bank statements, we discovered credit card bills showing purchases for Aiden and Mia that had been paid using checks from my trust account. We found records of the Florida vacation paid for entirely with my education funds. And most damning of all, we uncovered transfer records showing my father had moved money from my trust into accounts in his and Stephanie's names. By the end of the day, I had a comprehensive file of evidence. I no longer felt sad or confused. I felt angry, and for the first time in years, I felt powerful. I had the truth on my side, and I was ready to use it. I decided not to wait. With all the evidence meticulously gathered and organized, I chose to confront my father and Stephanie that very night. Jamie offered to stay for support, but this was something I needed to do alone. I set everything up carefully. I placed all the copied documents on the dining room table, arranged in chronological order. Bank statements showing withdrawals. Credit card bills for purchases made for Aiden and Mia. Travel receipts for the Florida vacation. Emails between my father and his lawyer. And at the center of it all, the trust document itself, with key sections, highlighted the sections specifying the money was for my education only, and the section outlining the legal consequences for misuse of trust funds. When I heard their car pull into the driveway, I took a deep breath. This was it. There was no going back. They entered laughing about something, their carefree mood a stark contrast to the storm about to break. When they saw me sitting at the dining table surrounded by papers, their laughter died immediately. "Tessa, what is all this?" my father asked, his eyes darting over the documents. "Please sit down," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "We need to talk about my education trust, the one Grandma Margaret set up for me, the one you've been stealing from." The color drained from my father's face. Stephanie looked confused for a moment, then defensive. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, but she didn't step closer to look at the papers. "Dad knows exactly what I'm talking about," I replied, not taking my eyes off him. "The trust fund my grandmother left me for college. Over $150,000 that should have paid for my education. Instead, it paid for Aiden's car, Mia's computer, your bathroom renovation, and your family vacation to Florida." My father sat down heavily, his eyes fixed on the table. Stephanie remained standing, her arms crossed. "You had no right to go through your father's private papers," she said, her voice sharp. "And he had no right to steal my money," I shot back. Money that was legally mine, left to me by my grandmother, meant specifically for my education. "I didn't steal anything." My father finally spoke, his voice weak. "I'm the trustee. I was managing the money." "Managing it?" I picked up a bank statement and read from it. Withdrawal of $20,000 on the same day you bought Aiden's car. Withdrawal of $5,000 the week you booked your Florida vacation. Withdrawal of $3,000 the day before you gave Mia her new laptop. That's not management, Dad. That's theft. You don't understand the pressures I've been under. He began running his hands through his hair. When I married Stephanie, I wanted to give her children the same opportunities you had. The same opportunities? I interrupted, my voice rising. I've been working 3 jobs and taking out loans to pay for college while you send Aiden to Europe with my money. I sleep 4 hours a night trying to maintain my grades and work enough to afford tuition while you buy Mia designer clothes with funds my grandmother left for my education. Stephanie stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. You have no idea what it takes to blend a family together. Your father was trying to make things fair for everyone. Fair, I laughed bitterly. There's nothing fair about what's happened here, and according to these documents, it's not just unfair, it's illegal. Just then the front door opened, and Aiden and Mia walked in. They stopped short when they saw the scene before them, their mother and my father looking stricken, me surrounded by papers, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. What's going on? Aiden asked, looking between us. I turned to him, suddenly realizing that he and Mia might be innocent in all this. They probably had no idea where the money for their privileges had come from. Did you know? I asked them directly. Did either of you know that your trips, your car, your computer, your clothes, all of it was paid for with money that was supposed to be for my college education? Money? My grandmother left me before she died. Their shocked expressions told me everything I needed to know. They had been kept in the dark just as much as I had. Dad? Mia turned to my father, her voice small. Is that true? My father looked trapped, glancing between his wife and his stepchildren. It's complicated, he began. No, it's not complicated, I cut in. It's actually very simple. You took money that legally belonged to me and spent it on your new family. You lied to me about not being able to help with my tuition. You watched me work myself to exhaustion and go into debt, all while you had access to more than enough money to pay for my education. There was a long, heavy silence. Then, surprisingly, it was Aiden who spoke. I didn't know, he said quietly, looking at me with genuine remorse. I never would have accepted the car or the Europe trip if I had known. Stephanie turned on him. Don't apologize to her. Your father was just trying to give you the things you deserve. By stealing from his daughter? Mia asked, her voice trembling. She turned to me. I'm so sorry, Tessa. I had no idea. My father finally seemed to break. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said, his voice cracking. When your mother died, everything changed. Stephanie helped me through that dark time. I wanted to make her happy, to make her kids feel welcome. At my expense, I finished for him. You chose them over me. Stephanie insisted they needed those things. He continued, not denying my accusation. The car, the trips, the clothes. I tried to explain about your trust fund, but she said since I was the trustee, I could decide how to use it. Stephanie gasped. How dare you blame this on me? You were the one who made the decisions. After you pressured me constantly, my father shot back. Always comparing what Aiden and Mia had to what other kids had, always talking about how they needed more better. As they turned on each other, I realized their relationship was built on quicksand. My father had compromised his integrity and betrayed his daughter to please his new wife, and now that the truth was exposed, they had nothing solid to stand on. I gathered all the documents and placed them carefully in my backpack. I'll be speaking with a lawyer about this, I said calmly. I expect a full accounting of the trust and the return of all misappropriated funds. Tessa, please. My father reached for my arm. We can work this out as a family. I pulled away from his touch. We're not a family anymore. You made that choice when you decided to steal from me to benefit them. As I walked out of the house that night, I felt a strange mix of devastation and liberation. The father I had loved and trusted was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. But for the first time in years, I was standing up for myself, refusing to be the sacrificial lamb for my father's new life. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain: I would never let anyone take advantage of me again. The days following my confrontation with my father and Stephanie were a blur of legal consultations and emotional processing. Jamie's family opened their home to me, giving me a safe place to stay during breaks from college. Her parents were outraged on my behalf and helped me navigate the confusing legal waters I now found myself in. My first step was finding a lawyer who specialized in trust law. Through one of my psychology professors, who also taught ethics in the law department, I was referred to Martha Hamilton, a fierce attorney known for her expertise in fiduciary litigation. Our initial meeting was both validating and educational. Martha's office was warm and inviting, with degrees and certifications covering one wall and family photos on another. She listened intently as I explained my situation, occasionally jotting notes or asking for clarification. What your father did was a clear violation of his fiduciary duty as trustee, she explained after reviewing the documents I had brought. The terms of your grandmother's trust are unambiguous. The funds were explicitly for your education, with any remaining balance to be transferred to you at age 25 or upon completion of your education. So, I have a case? I asked, trying to keep the hope from my voice. You have more than a case, Tessa, Martha said firmly. You have documented evidence of misappropriation of trust funds. In legal terms, that's a serious breach of fiduciary duty that could result in your father being removed as trustee, required to repay all misused funds with interest, and potentially face additional penalties. The process moved quickly after that. Martha drafted a formal demand letter to my father, outlining the evidence we had gathered and demanding a full accounting of the trust's immediate cessation of any further withdrawals and repayment of all misappropriated funds with interest. The letter also made it clear that if he did not comply within 30 days, we would file a lawsuit and potentially pursue criminal charges. Do you think he'll fight it? I asked Martha as she showed me the final draft of the letter. Based on what you've told me, I doubt it, she replied thoughtfully. He knows he's wrong, and he knows we have evidence. Fighting would only prolong the inevitable and potentially make his situation worse, especially if this becomes a criminal matter. While the legal process unfolded, I had to figure out how to continue my education. My jobs barely covered my living expenses, let alone tuition. With the trust funds in limbo, I wasn't sure how I would afford the upcoming semester. That's when another unexpected support system emerged. My Aunt Elaine, my mother's younger sister, contacted me after learning about the situation from Jamie's mother. Aunt Elaine had been living in California for years, and we had lost touch after my mother's death. I had always assumed she simply wasn't interested in maintaining a relationship with me. Your father told me you didn't want contact with that side of the family, she explained during our emotional phone call. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts for years, but he said you were too upset about your mother to want reminders of her family. Another lie. Another manipulation. Another way my father had isolated me to maintain control. Aunt Elaine was horrified to learn about the trust fund and immediately offered to help. Your mother would be devastated by what's happened, she said, her voice breaking. I had no idea about the trust, but I do know that Margaret was adamant about providing for your education. She valued learning above almost everything else. With Aunt Elaine's emotional and financial support, I was able to secure housing with her during summer breaks and focus on my studies without the constant pressure of working multiple jobs. She even helped me find a better part-time position at a psychology research lab that aligned with my career goals. Meanwhile, Aiden reached out to me with an unexpected message. He had found my email address through my university directory and sent a long, heartfelt apology. "I had no idea where the money for my car or the Europe trip came from," he wrote. "Since finding out I've deferred the study abroad program and have been working to save my own money, I feel terrible about what happened and want you to know that Mia and I both think what they did was wrong. We've both been arguing with Mom about it, but she refuses to acknowledge any wrongdoing." His message meant more to me than I expected. It was a reminder that the victims of toxic family dynamics aren't always obvious and that Aiden and Mia had been manipulated in their own way. 2 weeks after Martha sent the demand letter, I received an email from my father. For the first time, he took full responsibility for his actions without blaming Stephanie or circumstances. "I betrayed your trust and your grandmother's wishes," he wrote. "There is no excuse for what I did. I've retained an attorney to work with Ms. Hamilton on repayment arrangements. I will return every penny with interest as requested. I know this doesn't fix the damage I've done to our relationship, but I hope someday you might find it in your heart to give me a chance to earn your trust again." The email contained no mention of Stephanie, which made me wonder about the state of their relationship. Later, I would learn from Aiden that their marriage had begun to crumble under the weight of the truth. My father's betrayal had been exposed, but so had Stephanie's role in encouraging him to misuse my trust funds. 28 days after receiving our demand letter, my father's attorney contacted Martha with a settlement proposal. He would immediately repay the full amount withdrawn from the trust, plus interest calculated at the statutory rate, bringing the total to nearly $180,000. He would also voluntarily step down as trustee with Aunt Elaine appointed in his place if I agreed. Martha advised me to accept the offer. "This gives you everything we would have sought in court, without the emotional toll of a prolonged legal battle," she explained. "And having your aunt as trustee ensures the funds will be properly managed going forward." I accepted the terms, and within a week, the money was transferred to a new trust account under Aunt Elaine's management. For the first time since starting college, I could focus entirely on my education, without the constant stress of financial insecurity. 4 years have passed since I discovered the truth about my trust fund and confronted my father. Looking back now, I can see how that moment changed the trajectory of not just my education, but my entire life. The immediate aftermath was painful. I spent months cycling through grief, anger, and disbelief. How could the father who had once been my rock betray me so completely? How could he watch me struggle financially, work myself to exhaustion, and go into debt, all while using my money to fund his new family's comfortable lifestyle? Therapy became essential to my healing process. My psychology background had taught me the importance of professional help, and I was fortunate to find a compassionate therapist through my university's counseling center. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that what I had experienced was a form of financial abuse and parental betrayal trauma. "Your reaction is normal," she assured me during one particularly difficult session. "You're grieving not just the loss of financial security, but the loss of the father you thought you had." Journaling became another crucial outlet. I filled notebook after notebook with my thoughts, memories, and realizations. Writing helped me process the complex emotions and begin to make sense of what had happened. It also helped me recognize the red flags I had ignored and the boundaries I had failed to set. With the trust fund restored and under Aunt Elaine's careful management, I was able to leave my exhausting work schedule behind and focus on my education. I moved out of my cramped shared apartment into a modest but comfortable studio closer to campus. I could afford textbooks without wincing at the price tags. I could even occasionally meet friends for dinner without calculating if it meant skipping meals later in the week. The academic transformation was immediate. Without constant financial stress and exhaustion, my grades improved dramatically. I had time for research opportunities and internships that enhanced my learning and built my resume. I joined psychology clubs and attended conferences, building a network of peers and mentors. Aunt Elaine became a steadfast presence in my life, filling some of the void left by both my mother and father. She shared stories about my mom that I had never heard, showing me photos from their childhood and telling me about the strong, compassionate woman my mother had been before I was even born. Through her, I reconnected with my maternal roots and found a sense of belonging I had been missing. My relationship with Aiden and Mia evolved in unexpected ways. Free from the toxic influence of their mother, who had encouraged their entitled behavior, they showed themselves to be thoughtful and caring individuals. Aiden ultimately earned his own money for a shortened study abroad program, appreciating it far more for having worked for it. Mia reached out to me for college advice, determined to make her own way rather than relying on parental handouts. As for my father and Stephanie, their marriage did not survive the exposure of their betrayal. From what Aiden told me, the truth about the trust fund was just the beginning. Once the deception was revealed, other lies and manipulations came to light. They separated 6 months after our confrontation and divorced a year later. For a long time, I maintained complete distance from my father. His emails and calls went unanswered as I focused on healing and rebuilding my life. But about a year after the settlement, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a coffee shop near my university. He looked older, the lines in his face deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. We sat across from each other, the table between us seeming wider than its actual dimensions. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, his voice unsteady. "I know I don't deserve your time." "Why did you do it?" I asked the question that had haunted me for months. "How could you watch me struggle while you spent my money on them?" He took a deep breath. "I could give you excuses about Stephanie's influence or financial pressure, but the truth is simpler and worse. I was weak. I wanted her approval and her children's acceptance more than I valued my responsibility to you. I betrayed everything your mother and I had planned for you. There's no justification for that." His honesty surprised me. I had expected defensiveness or minimization, not this raw acknowledgement of his failure. "I miss who you used to be," I admitted. "The dad who took me fishing and helped me with homework and promised to always be there for me." "I miss him too," my father replied, tears welling in his eyes. "And I would give anything to be that man again, to earn back your trust someday." That meeting didn't instantly repair our relationship, but it was a beginning. Over time, we have established a new dynamic. Trust returns slowly, built on actions rather than promises. We now meet monthly for lunch, carefully rebuilding something that will never be what it once was, but might someday be honest and meaningful in its own way. As I approach graduation with my psychology degree, I've made a decision that would have surprised the heartbroken girl who discovered her father's betrayal 4 years ago. I'm applying to law schools, specifically looking at programs that specialize in family and trust law. Martha Hamilton has become a mentor, showing me how legal expertise can protect vulnerable people in family situations. "You have the perfect background," she told me during a recent lunch meeting. "Your psychology education combined with your personal experience gives you insight many lawyers never develop. The road ahead will be challenging, but for the first time in years, I'm excited about the future. I've discovered a strength in myself I never knew existed, the strength to stand up for what's right, to demand justice, and to rebuild from betrayal. The most profound lesson I've learned through this ordeal is that family isn't defined by blood or legal ties, but by respect, trust, and genuine care. My true family now includes Aunt Elaine Jamie and her parents' mentors like Martha and Dr. Martinez, and even Aiden and Mia in their own way. These are the people who supported me when I needed it most, who celebrated my victories, and comforted me through my darkest moments. Sometimes, losing what you thought was your family is the first step to finding the people who truly deserve to be in your life. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family injustice? Comment below and share your story. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming family betrayal. And remember, you deserve to be treated with respect and fairness, especially by those who claim to love you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives strength to anyone facing similar challenges.